There's a war within you, not a war of nations, not a war of words, but a war between what is real and what only pretends to be, the spirit and the ego, two forces that cannot reign together. One seeks control, the other seeks truth. One shouts, the other whispers. And every single day, you stand at the center of this battle. You feel it when you wake, that silent tension in your chest, as if two worlds are tugging at your soul. One says, do more, become more, win. The other says, be still, listen, remember. This is the daily war of the chosen one, the invisible storm between illusion and truth, the conflict between who you think you are and who you truly are. The ego will not die quietly. It will disguise itself as your thoughts, your fears, your plans, your pain. It will convince you that you are in control, that you must hold it all together. That surrender means defeat, but surrender is not defeat. It is the beginning of freedom, because the truth is, you were never in control. You only believed you were. The ego builds its kingdom on control. It survives through fear. It feeds on comparison. It thrives on identity. But none of these things are real. And deep inside you, something sacred already knows this. A quiet, ancient voice within says, let go. You were never meant to carry this alone. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath. Now listen. Beneath your thoughts, there is silence. Beneath the noise, there is presence. That presence is your spirit. That stillness is God within you. You do not need to find him. You only need to stop resisting what already is. For God never left you. It was only the ego that stood between you and the truth. The illusion that you are separate from him. The illusion that you must become something more to be worthy. But listen, chosen one, you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness comes not through striving, but through surrender. The battle between your spirit and your ego is not about right or wrong. It is about remembering. It is about returning. Returning to the place before the noise, before the wounds, before the mask, before the illusion said, you are this name. You're this story. You're not the story. You are the awareness watching the story unfold. And until you awaken to that truth, the ego will keep you trapped in a dream where you keep chasing peace instead of becoming it. But something divine is calling you deeper now. You can feel it. The old ways of control are breaking. The masks are falling. The illusions are burning. Not to destroy you, but to reveal what has always been real. For God, in his mercy, will not allow the false to lead you for long. Every collapse, every loss, every betrayal, it was never punishment. It was purification, the dismantling of illusion, so that the spirit could rise. So now, as you begin this sacred journey, remember this truth. You are not at war with the world. You are awakening within it. The battle between your spirit and your ego is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to free you, and freedom begins when you stop fighting what must fall and allow God to lead what must rise. Breathe. Let the noise settle. You're safe here. You are seen. You are guided. The path is not outside you. It is within you. And tonight, the battle will end, not with victory, but with surrender. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Control. The ego does not announce itself. It builds quietly, layer upon layer, thought by thought, fear by fear. It begins with a simple whisper. I must be something. I must become. I must protect what I am. And in that single whisper, a wall begins to form between you and God, between truth and illusion, between being and becoming. The ego is the silent architect of identity. It builds masks out of pain and crowns them as me. It protects what was never real and calls it survival. But you The chosen one, you have begun to see the cracks. You can feel that the life you were building was built upon sand, and the storms of awakening are washing all away. The weight of the crown. Control feels like safety. You've worn its crown for so long that you forgot its weight was crushing you. You've planned, predicted, and performed, hoping to hold your world together. But the more you try to control it, the more it slipped through your hands. The ego says, if I don't do it, who will? But the spirit whispers, you never had to. You were never meant to control life. You were meant to move with it, to flow like the river, not dam its current. The illusion of control is the greatest prison built by fear. And yet, it is the most subtle, because the mind calls it wisdom, and the ego calls it strength. But strength without surrender is still weakness disguised. It exhausts the soul. It separates you from grace. The prison of I. The ego lives inside one word. I think. I want. I know. I deserve. I control. But this I is not your soul. It is a thought pretending to be you. The real you, the eternal one, does not need to defend itself. It does not need to win. It only needs to remember. Yet the ego fears remembrance, because remembrance is death to illusion. And so it distracts you with overthinking, with endless comparison, with the search for meaning in everything but yourself. Pause. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a slow, deep breath. Notice who is breathing. Notice who is aware of the breath. That silent watcher. That is not your ego. That is your spirit. The one who sees without judging. The one who hears without reacting. The one who knows without knowing why. This is the awareness the ego fears most. Because in that awareness, it begins to disappear. The mind's rebellion. When you begin to awaken, the ego fights harder. It floods your thoughts with noise. It whispers fear, doubt, and guilt. It tells you that if you let go, you'll lose everything. It says, you'll be nothing without me. And in a way, it's right. Because when you let go, you do lose something. But it's not your life you lose. It's the lie you've been living. You lose the constant need to be seen. You lose the hunger for validation. You lose the addiction to control. You lose the voice that keeps you small. And when those illusions fall away, what remains is freedom. The kind of mind cannot understand. The mirage of control. Imagine standing before the ocean and commanding the waves to stop. You shout, you beg, you plead, but the sea keeps moving. That is what the ego does every day. It stands before life itself and tries to control the tides. But life cannot be controlled. It can only be surrendered to. God's design was never built to obey your will. It was built to awaken it. The illusion of control is the ego's attempt to replace trust with tension, to replace surrender with striving, to replace faith with fear. And every time you choose fear, you drift further from God, not because He left, but because you stopped listening. The pain of resistance, the suffering you feel, is not because life is cruel. It is because you resist what is. The ego resists silence, because silence exposes it. It resists surrender, because surrender ends it. It resists truth, because truth frees you from it. But the spirit within you knows that resistance is simply a doorway to revelation. When you stop running from pain and begin to see it, really see it, you discover it was never your enemy. It was your teacher. It came to break the chains the ego called protection. It came to show you that peace is not found in control, but in trust, the fall of the illusion. Every chosen one must one day face the collapse, the moment where nothing works, where prayers feel silent, where every plan falls apart. And in that breaking, the illusion of control dies. This is where you meet God, not as an idea, but as presence. He lets everything fall. so you can finally see that you are never holding it up. He removes what you cling to, so you can finally grasp what cannot be taken away. And though your mind calls it loss, your soul calls it liberation, the surrender of the mind. Take a breath. Place your hand over your heart. Now ask yourself quietly, what am I still trying to control? A relationship? A dream? The pace of your healing? The opinion of others? Now release it, not in thought, but in faith. Tell God, I'm tired of playing your role. Let me instead. And as you whisper these words, something unseen begins to shift. The storm quiets, the walls soften, and the light within finally begins to rise. The beginning of true power. True power is not control. It is alignment. The ego fights to shape reality. The spirit flows to serve it. One resists the current. The other becomes the river. When you stop forcing outcomes, you make room for miracles. When you stop controlling people, you make room for divine alignment. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you make room for healing to happen naturally. Control is a symptom of distrust. Surrender is a sign of faith. And faith is not blindness. It is sight beyond sight. It is knowing that even when you cannot see the way, you're being led. You are never in control, but you were always in His hands. Every delay was divine timing. Every detour was protection. Every loss was redirection. You thought you were falling apart, but you were falling into grace. So stop fighting the current. Stop trying to lead the wind. Be still. Let the Spirit lead, because the illusion of control must fall before truth can rise. And when it does, you will finally remember what it means to be free. Chapter 2. The False Self. The mask that must fall. No one is born false. Every soul begins pure, open, naked, unashamed before God. But then the world begins to speak, and we begin to listen. We learn that love must be earned. We learn that safety means silence. We learn that worth must be proven. And so, the mask begins to form. Piece by piece, you build a self to survive. A version of you that fits in. A version that doesn't cry too loudly. A version that pleases, performs, and pretends. You call this survival, but it's really separation. Separation from your true essence, from the spirit within, from the God who formed you. Because the moment you became who they wanted, you began to forget who you were. The weight of pretending. The mask is heavy. It smiles when the heart aches. It nods when the soul trembles. It says, I'm fine, when the spirit is starving. You wear it so long, you begin to believe it's your face. You start protecting the very lie that's keeping you bound. And yet, God, in His mercy, will never let you stay asleep. He will begin to whisper. He will send you storms that shake the mask loose. He will pull away the people who only love the illusion. He will let your false self crumble, so your true self can rise. This is grace disguised as chaos. This is mercy disguised as loss. The addiction to identity. The ego thrives on identification. It says, I am what I do. I'm how I look. I am what I own. I am what they think of me. But the Spirit knows. You're none of these things. You're not your body. You are the light animating it. You're not your thoughts. You are the stillness watching them. You're not your story. You are the space in which stories come and go. Yet the ego fears this knowing, because when you remember who you are, it no longer exists. And so it keeps you busy, scrolling, comparing, achieving, chasing. It wants you to forget, because forgetting keeps it alive. But there comes a day, a sacred day, when the forgetting no longer works. When you begin to ask, who am I beneath it all? That question is the beginning of awakening. The collapse of the persona. At some point, the mask begins to crack. It may happen through heartbreak, through failure, through betrayal, through exhaustion so deep, your pretending simply stops working. And in that breaking, you meet yourself, not the image, not the role, not the one you show the world, but the raw, trembling, sacred being behind it all. And though the ego will panic, this is the most holy moment of your life, because what feels like death is really resurrection. The false self dies, so the truth can finally live. Beneath the mask, close your eyes, breathe deeply. Now imagine the many faces you've worn. The achiever, the lover, the friend, the warrior. Which one feels the heaviest? Which one feels furthest from peace? Now see yourself removing it. Slowly, gently, without judgment. Let it fall to the ground like a shell too small for your spirit. Now, ask yourself quietly, who am I without this mask? And listen, not with your ears, but with your soul. Beneath the identity, beneath the story, beneath even your name, there is stillness, there is light, there is you. The fear of being seen. The ego fears exposure. It trembles at the thought of being seen without its armor. It believes that without the mask, you will not be loved. But this is the greatest lie, because only when you remove the mask can real love find you. Only when you stand unguarded can grace enter. The spirit cannot bless the version of you that is pretending. It can only bless what is real. And so God begins to strip you, not to punish, but to purify. He removes the fake so you can feel the true. He removes the noise so you can hear his whisper. He removes the mask so you can see his face, the echo of the true self. Even under the heaviest mask, the true self never dies. It waits, it watches, it whispers in dreams, it cries out in your moments of silence. It says, I am still here, I have never left. And when you finally pause long enough to listen, you realize the voice you were chasing all along was not coming from above, but from within, because God's light did not visit you. It was placed inside you. You are not separate from him. You are an extension of him. The ego says, find God. The spirit says, remember him. And remembrance happens when a mask finally falls. The fire of transformation. Before gold becomes pure, it must pass through fire. So must you. The ego burns in the flames of awakening. It screams as its illusions melt away. It pleads for control, for comfort, for the old familiar pain. But the fire does not come to destroy you. It comes to refine you, to burn away everything that was never true, every false identity, every role you were never meant to play, every story you outgrew long ago. This is not punishment. This is purification. And when the flames fade, only the truth remains, the beauty of nothingness. The ego fears nothingness. It calls it death, but the spirit calls it peace. When you no longer need to be someone, you become everything. When you no longer need to prove, you begin to flow. When you no longer chase meaning, you begin to embody it. In a silence beyond self, there is no striving, no image, no competition, only presence. This is the beginning of true freedom, the place where control dies and communion begins. The whisper of grace. Listen closely. Grace has been following you all along, not to reward the perfect version of you, but to awaken the real one. God never fell in love with your mask. He fell in love with your essence. He saw the light you buried under pain, and he never stopped calling you home. Every failure, every fall, every ending that broke your pride was grace, because only through breaking does the false self lose its hold. Only through emptiness does truth finally have space to enter. And in that moment of surrender, you begin to see you were never becoming someone. You were unbecoming everything you were not. The return to authentic being. Breathe deeply. Feel the weight lifting. The mask is gone. The pretending has ended. Now, you're free to be seen, free to be silent, free to be guided. You are not who you thought you were. You are who you've always been, a child of light, led by the Spirit, watched over by God. The false self must fall, for the true one to rise. And now, chosen one, you rise. Chapter 3. The Voice of the Spirit. Learning to listen to God within. The voice of the Spirit does not shout. It does not argue with your thoughts. It does not compete for your attention. It whispers, gently, lovingly, constantly. But to hear it, you must first learn the language of silence. The ego speaks in urgency. The Spirit speaks in peace. The ego demands. The Spirit invites. You have heard both your entire life. You just didn't know how to tell them apart. Because the ego wears volume as power, but the Spirit carries stillness as truth. The sound of silence. There is a sound behind every sound, a silence behind every word. It is not emptiness. It is awareness, the pulse of God within you. When a mind grows quiet enough, you can feel it, the subtle hum of divine presence. It doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in knowing, sometimes as peace, sometimes as conviction, sometimes as a sudden understanding that seems to arrive from nowhere, but is not nowhere, is within. This is where God dwells, not in temples of stone, but in the temple of your awareness. You do not need to look up to find him. You only need to look within and listen. The two voices within. Every day, you hear two voices. One says, protect yourself. The other says, trust me. One says, take control. The other says, let go. One says, you're not enough. The other whispers, you are mine. This is the battle within the chosen one. The mind versus the soul. The fear versus faith. The illusion versus God. And every moment, you are choosing which one to follow. The ego promises safety, but it only gives you tension. The Spirit promises truth, but it requires surrender. The difference between them is not in their words, but in how they make you feel. The ego stirs anxiety. The Spirit brings peace. Always, the still small voice. When Elijah fled to the mountain, he sought to hear the voice of God. There was wind, there was fire, there was an earthquake, but God was in none of them. And then, a still small voice. That is how God speaks. Not through noise, but through stillness. Not through thunder, but through intimacy. You will not find him in the chaos. You will find him in the quiet space. Between your breaths. That space is holy. That pause is prayer. Close your eyes. Breathe in slowly. Now notice, something is watching the breath. That watcher, that awareness, is where God lives. The practice of listening to the Spirit, is not about hearing words. It's about learning sensitivity. The more you silence your need to control, the louder his presence becomes. When your thoughts soften, intuition rises. When your fears dissolve, guidance emerges. Because the Spirit is always speaking, but only surrender can hear it. The ego listens to react. The Spirit listens to understand. So stop trying to figure out your path. Start feeling it. Start sensing the gentle nudge of peace that says, this way. That peace is not a coincidence. It is divine direction. How the Spirit speaks through life. The Spirit does not only speak in prayer. It speaks through everything. Through a line in a song that pierces your heart. Through the timing of a stranger's kindness. Through a delay that redirects your steps. Through a silence that asks you to pause. Every moment is communication. Every experience, a conversation. The more awake you become, the more you realize nothing was ever random. The Spirit speaks in alignment, in intuition, in divine coincidences. that the ego calls luck. But the awakened know there is no luck in God's plan. There is only orchestration. The barriers to hearing God. You ask, why can't I hear him? But the question is not why he is silent. The question is, why is there so much noise? The spirit is not absent. Your attention is just crowded. Crowded with fear, with anxiety, with a constant craving to be seen, with the endless loop of self-doubt. To hear God, you must make space for him. Space in your mind through silence. Space in your heart through forgiveness. Space in your day through stillness. Because God does not compete for the space you refuse to surrender. Find a quiet place. Let your shoulders drop. Breathe slowly. Now ask softly, Spirit, what are you trying to show me right now? Don't chase an answer. Just listen. Notice what arises. A thought, a feeling, a memory, a simple awareness of peace. Whatever it is, that is how the Spirit begins to speak. It's never rushed, never harsh, always loving, always pointing you toward truth. And the more you honor that voice, the more it begins to guide your every step. The fruits of listening. When the Spirit leads, life stops feeling forced. Doors open without struggle. People appear without striving. Clarity arrives without anxiety. Because you have aligned yourself with divine flow. This is what it means to walk in the Spirit, to move in peace, to act from stillness, to trust the unseen hand guiding you. And in that trust, you find a peace that defies understanding. The ego calls it foolishness, but the chosen know it is wisdom beyond words, the union of voice and will. When your inner voice and God's voice unite, you begin to live in harmony. No longer two wills, but one. No longer I want, but thy will be done. This is not slavery. This is liberation. Because to follow the Spirit is to return to your natural state, oneness with the divine. And in that oneness, there is no fear of missing your destiny, because you are the destiny. Your path unfolds as you walk it. Your steps are guided as you take them. You're no longer forcing life. You're being carried by it. The sacred voice. The Spirit does not speak in noise. It speaks in knowing. It will never tell you who to be. It will remind you who you are. And when you truly listen, you will realize it was never God who was silent. It was you who was distracted. Now the silence is open. Now the awareness is clear. Now the voice of truth can finally be heard. Listen closely, chosen one. You are being guided, not towards something new, but back to what you've always been. A soul in communion with its creator. A breath in rhythm with the divine. A voice within the voice. Chapter 4. The Fall of the False Self. There comes a time in every chosen one's journey when what you built must fall apart, not as punishment, but as purification. The self you created to survive cannot walk with you into the light of who you truly are. The false self must fall. The illusions must burn. The ego must bow. You will feel it first as resistance. The mind will fight for what it knows. The old habits will cling. The old identity will cry out, "Without me, you are nothing." But that is the lie that has kept humanity asleep for ages. The ego fears death because it believes it is the source of life. It cannot comprehend that what calls death is actually rebirth. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. You may not see it, but something divine is already shifting within you. Everything you've lost, everything that has been stripped away, was never truly yours. It was only borrowed by the ego to make you feel enough. But now, you're being asked to walk without it, to walk without titles, without validation, without control, so that you may finally discover what cannot be taken from you. This is the holy unraveling, the shedding of illusions, layer by layer, until only the truth remains. At first, it feels like chaos. You may say, "I'm losing everything," but in truth, you're losing nothing real. The house was built on sand. The mask was made of fear. And now, God is showing you that the sand was never your foundation. He is returning you to the rock, the spirit within. The ego built a false kingdom of control and appearance. It said, "I am what I own. I am what I achieve. I am how others see me." But one by one, the walls collapse, the roles dissolve, the applause fades, and in the silence that follows, you meet yourself for the first time. There is a sacred pain in watching the false self die. It is not just loss, it is divine surgery. God removes what you thought you needed until your hands are empty enough to receive what you were always meant to hold. You will cry, you will question, you will beg for the old to return, but heaven will remain silent. Not because God has abandoned you, but because silence is his tool. It is in silence that the spirit speaks, and the ego is starved. Every chosen one must pass through this fire. It is not punishment, it is passage. You will not walk through it unchanged. You cannot, for the light that burns illusions also purifies the soul. This is why suffering can feel so holy. It strips you bare until only truth remains. When the false self begins to fall, it is terrifying. You may look at the ruins and say, "Who am I now?" And God whispers, "You are who you've always been, my child." It is the ego that wants definition, but the spirit knows essence. It does not say, "I am this or that." It says, "I am." Look deeper, chosen one. Everything that's ending right now is making space for your true beginning. Your pain is not punishment. It's prophecy, a sacred sign that something divine is awakening within you. The false self cannot follow you here. It was never meant to. This is where truth begins. Close your eyes again. Place your hand over your heart. Feel that? That subtle pulse, that steady rhythm. That is life unfiltered, not the performance of living, but the essence of it. You are still here, even after the identity fell, even after the masks dissolved, even after the ego screamed. You remained, because the spirit cannot die. The ego thinks surrender means death, but surrender is simply returning home to what never left. And in this surrender, you are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself, because who you truly are has been waiting beneath the rubble all along. The spirit does not need to become. It simply needs to be allowed to lead. The battle between your spirit and your ego is nearing its climax now. The old self is losing power. Its voice grows weaker, while your spirit grows stronger. The darkness trembles, for it knows it cannot dwell where truth has entered. Every illusion that once blinded you is bowing before the light of awareness. You are awakening. You are remembering. You're being made whole. And when the final layer of illusion falls, you will realize there was never a battle at all. Only God teaching you to remember that you were never separate, never lost, never broken, just asleep in the dream of the ego. And now, you're waking up. Take a deep breath. You're safe in the falling. You're being held in the breaking. For only when the false self falls can the true self rise. And this is the beginning of resurrection. Chapter 5. The Surrender and the Silence. There is a moment, after the storm has passed, when everything becomes still. The noise fades, the striving ceases, the ego grows quiet, and you are left with only yourself and God. This is the sacred silence, the holy pause between the ending and the beginning. between the fall and the rising. This is where surrender begins. At first, surrender feels like loss, because the ego equates letting go with giving up. But true surrender is not the collapse of strength. It is the discovery of real power. It is the moment you realize you were never the doer, only the vessel, that it was never you holding life together. It was God holding you. Close your eyes for a moment, breathe slowly, and notice what remains when you stop trying, when you stop fighting, defending, fixing, controlling. What is left? Silence, stillness, presence, awareness. This is the spirit. This is where God speaks. The ego fills the air with noise. It argues. It analyzes. It fears silence, because silence is its death. But the spirit dwells in the silence, the stillness that lives. Beneath every thought, it doesn't speak in panic. It doesn't shout. It whispers, softly, like light touching water. Be still, it says, and know that I am God. The chosen one learns that silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the space where heaven breathes through you. For so long, you thought surrender meant losing control. But now you see, you never had control to lose. What you called control was only resistance, a shield against fear, a cage made of effort. And when you finally let go, when you open your hands and allow what is to simply be, you are free. The Spirit leads, not through force, but through flow. It is not command, it guides. It does not pressure, it invites. When you stop resisting, you begin to move with the rhythm of divine will, like a leaf carried by the river. You stop trying to steer and start to trust where the current is taking you. That current is God's hand, and it will never fail you. You have spent your life trying to make things happen, trying to become something, trying to find purpose, trying to be good enough. But now, God is inviting you to stop trying and trust instead, to walk by faith, not by sight, to act not from fear, but from divine impulse. Because when the Spirit leads, you do not need to control. You only need to listen. The ego says, if I stop fighting, I will fall. The Spirit says, if you stop fighting, you will rise. And this is the paradox of surrender. You must fall to rise. You must release to receive. You must die to truly live. And as you surrender, you realize you are not surrendering to God. You are surrendering into God, back into what you always were. Breathe again. Let the air enter your chest, like forgiveness. Inhale peace. Exhale control. You don't need to plan every step. You don't need to understand every reason. God knows, and that is enough. When you live from surrender, life becomes graceful, not because the storms stop coming, but because you stop resisting the rain. You begin to see that every delay, every ending, every silence was a part of divine timing. God was never late. He was teaching you patience. He was not ignoring you. He was purifying your hearing. Because if he answered too soon, you would have listened with your ego. But now, you listen with your spirit. In the silence, you learn the most sacred truth. God does not need your performance. He only asks for your presence. He does not need your perfection. He wants your surrender. Because in surrender, you become an open vessel, and his love begins to pour through you. The Spirit will lead you to places that make no sense to the mind. It will whisper, walk away, wait, forgive, be still, and your ego will panic. It will demand certainty. It will shout, what if I'm wrong? But the Spirit replies softly, what if this is faith? Faith is walking, even when you cannot see, trusting, even when you cannot prove, loving, even when you are not loved in return. To surrender is to stop demanding answers and start living as the answer. You no longer ask, "What is my purpose?" Because you realize you are the purpose, God's presence expressing itself. Through human form, you stop searching for meaning and become meaning itself. This is the peace that passes all understanding, the peace that arises when the war ends and silence takes its throne. Close your eyes again. Listen, there is no rush here, no competition, no proving, just the hum of existence, the quiet heartbeat of the universe, beating in sync with yours. This is surrender. This is union. You are no longer chasing God. You are resting in God, becoming one with the very presence you were once searching for. And from this silence, something new will emerge. Not the old self rebuilt, but the true self revealed. Your spirit, pure and free, will begin to lead your life with divine intelligence. You will speak, but the words will be guided. You will act, but the actions will flow with grace. You will walk, but every step will be directed. This is what it means to live surrendered. The ego says, "I must find the way." The spirit says, "I am the way." For when the ego falls silent, the voice of God becomes clear, and that voice has always been within you. Quiet, faithful, unmoved. Breathe, be still. Feel the silence between your heartbeats. That is God. You are home. You are held. You are whole. Let the silence lead now. Let the Spirit lead. Chapter 6. When the Spirit begins to lead, there is a peace that comes after the storm. Not the peace of silence alone, but the peace of alignment. The war within you has quieted. The ego's voice grows faint, and the Spirit's whisper becomes clear. You no longer move from fear. You move from knowing. You no longer strive to become. You simply are. This is the beginning of Spirit-led living. At first, it feels subtle, like a breeze brushing your awareness, a gentle pull in your chest, a quiet nudge within your soul. You start to notice that you're being guided, not by logic, not by pressure, but by peace. Decisions that once felt heavy begin to unfold with grace. Paths you once forced begin to open effortlessly. You begin to see you were never meant to push. You were meant to flow. Close your eyes, take a slow breath, and feel what it's like to be guided from within, not by the voice that demands, but by the voice that knows. That gentle knowing is not imagination. It is your spirit, the divine compass of God within you. It does not rush. It does not fear. It simply knows. And as you begin to trust it, your life starts to move, like a prayer in motion. The ego once asked, "What should I do?" The Spirit now whispers, "Who am I being?" Because life is no longer about doing. It's about being aligned, being the light that God placed within you, being the vessel through which heaven moves, being the peace that others can feel when you enter the room. When the Spirit leads, your presence becomes ministry. You begin to feel a divine rhythm guiding your days. Synchronicities appear, small signs that heaven is arranging the details. A conversation at the right moment, a door that opens without effort, a delay that reveals itself as protection. You no longer call it luck, you call it grace. For when the Spirit leads, life is no longer random. It becomes orchestration. Every breath, every silence, every step, part of a sacred design. The Spirit will not always lead you where it is comfortable. Sometimes it leads you into wilderness. Sometimes it asks you to wait. Sometimes it leads you into things you don't understand. But the Chosen One knows. Obedience is not about comfort. It's about trust. You follow not because you see the end, but because you know who walks beside you. And every time you obey the whisper, you strengthen your connection You become a living instrument of divine will. The Spirit's language is not noise. It is peace. If your decision brings anxiety, that is not the Spirit. If it brings rest to your soul, that is God's guidance. He will not lead you through panic. He will lead you through peace. Because His direction is never rushed, never manipulative, never confusing. It feels gentle, steady, and sure. When the Spirit leads, you stop competing, you stop comparing, you stop chasing timelines that were never yours. You no longer measure your worth by how fast you grow or how much you achieve. You begin to understand that alignment is better than ambition. You may not be ahead, but you are in tune, and that harmony with God's timing is worth more than any worldly success. There will be moments when the ego tries to return. It will whisper, "You're falling behind. You need to do more. You're missing your chance." But now you can see it clearly. You recognize the tone. You smile and say, "I'm exactly where God needs me to be." That is freedom. That is mastery. When the Spirit leads, you no longer react. You respond from stillness. You no longer fear outcomes. You trust divine orchestration. Close your eyes again. Imagine your life as a river. For years, the ego fought against the current. It built dams of control. It shouted at the waves. But the Spirit simply flows. Now you flow. You move not by force, but by grace. Not by striving, but by surrender. You are being carried by something greater than your own will. And that is where peace lives. When the Spirit leads, you become sensitive to presence. You can feel when peace leaves a place. You can sense when your energy shifts. You can tell when something aligns and when it does not. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is spiritual sight. It means your inner world has become clear enough to perceive what your mind cannot. You see through vibration. You discern through stillness. You follow through love. God will begin to reveal how He's been leading you all along. Every setback that made no sense was divine positioning. Every delay was preparation. Every loss was alignment. You look back and realize you were never wandering. You were being led. The Spirit's hand was quietly guiding you through every detour and silence. And now that you see it, you can trust it deeper. There's a serenity that fills your being when you let God take the wheel. You stop trying to write the story. You start allowing it to unfold. You begin to wake up each morning, not asking, "What must I do today?" but saying, "Spirit, lead me." And as you move through the day, you start to notice something miraculous. Life starts working with you, not against you. People show up. Opportunities align. The right words come. The right doors open. Because when you are in sync with divine flow, you attract by being, not by striving. This is how the chosen one lives. Not by egoic effort, but by divine ease. Not by chasing purpose, but by embodying it. You become an extension of God's will, a living channel of divine expression. Your words heal. Your silence comforts. Your presence awakens others. Because you no longer speak from self. You speak from Spirit. The Spirit will lead you to love when it's hard, to forgive when it hurts, to let go when it's time. And every act of obedience polishes your soul until you shine with divine light. This is not weakness. It's divine mastery, the ability to move. Only when heaven moves. That's what it means to walk by the Spirit. Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Whisper softly within yourself, "Spirit, lead me," and feel what happens. Your chest softens. Your thoughts slow down. Your energy aligns. That is what happens when you return home to divine rhythm. The world will keep running in noise. People will keep fighting for control. But You will move differently now. You will walk slower, speak wiser, love deeper, because when the Spirit leads, you become one with the intelligence of creation itself. Your life stops being a reaction and becomes revelation. You're not behind. You're being guided. You're not lost. You're being led. Follow the peace. Follow the stillness. Follow the whisper. For that whisper is the voice of God leading you home. Chapter 7. Becoming one with God within. There comes a point in every awakening when the seeker dissolves into what was being sought, when you stop reaching and realize you were never separate, you were never lost, you were never broken, you were simply learning to remember the truth. You and God were never two. This is the mystery of oneness, the great unveiling, beyond religion, beyond identity, beyond form. It is the moment you no longer believe in God. You become aware of Him as the very breath that moves through you. He is no longer above you or beyond you. He is you, the living presence, behind your eyes, within your heart, within every atom of existence. For so long, you thought awakening meant becoming more spiritual, more pure, more enlightened. But God smiles. He whispers, you were never meant to become. You were meant to remember. Remember that before the pain, before the masks, before the illusion of me, there was only light, and that light is what you still are. Close your eyes. Breathe. Do you feel that? That quiet awareness watching the breath. That is not your mind. That is the divine, observing through you. You are not thinking the thought. You are witnessing it. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. You are not the voice of fear. You are the silence beneath it. That silence is God's presence, living in you. The battle is over now. The war within has ended. The Spirit has reclaimed its throne. You no longer need to fight your ego. You simply see it, and in that seeing, it loses its power, for illusion cannot survive in the light of awareness. Now, you no longer live as the self. You live as the awareness that moves through the self. And this changes everything. When the egodeath, you spoke from fear. When the Spirit leads, you speak from love. When the egodeath, you reacted from wounds. When the Spirit leads, you respond from wisdom. And now, you begin to understand why everything happened the way it did. The pain was not punishment. It was purification. It stripped you of everything you were not, so that you could remember what you always were, God's reflection in human form. You begin to see God everywhere, not as an idea, but as reality, in the sunlight warming your face, in the stranger's smile, in the wind brushing through the trees, in the silence that meets you when you pray. You realize He was never far. He was breathing through it all. Every heartbeat, every lesson, every fall was His way of leading you home. When you become one with God within, life stops being divided. You stop saying mine and yours. You stop saying this is sacred and this is ordinary, because now you see everything is sacred. Every moment is divine. Every breath is holy ground. You are living not for God, but as the expression of God. This is not arrogance. This is remembrance. You have returned to what you always were, before the world told you who to be. When you look into another's eyes, you no longer see other. You see the same divine spark. Looking back at you, you realize there was never a them, only different reflections of the same eternal light. The illusion of separation dissolves. The illusion of judgment fades. And in its place, there is compassion, there is love, there is peace. Close your eyes once more. Listen, the mind will try to name this, but what you feel now cannot be named. It is the stillness beyond thought, the awareness before words. the truth that remains. When all illusions fade, this is what the mystics meant when they said, "The kingdom of God is within you." It is not a place. It is a presence. It is here, now. When you walk as one with God within, life becomes effortless devotion. Every act becomes prayer. Every word becomes vibration. Every silence becomes worship. You do not try to be spiritual. You simply are. You do not chase miracles. You become one. You live not as a seeker, but as the found. And in this awareness, the chosen one becomes light for others. Not by preaching, but by being. Not by teaching, but by embodying. Your presence becomes healing. Your peace becomes contagious. Your love becomes the evidence that God is real. Because when people meet you, they feel Him. That is what it means to be a chosen one, not to be above others, but to remember first, so you can guide others home. When the Spirit leads and you walk as one with God, you no longer fear the unknown. You trust the unseen. You rest in the mystery. You understand that even your next breath is divinely timed. And in that trust, there is no more struggle. There is no more anxiety. There's only flow. You live as awareness itself. Open, surrendered, alive. Now, take one more deep breath. Let fill your chest. And as you exhale, release the last fragment of control. Say within yourself, "I'm not separate from God. I am one with the light within me. I walk in divine truth, guided by the Spirit, led by peace, anchored in love." The chosen one is not chosen because they are better, but because they awaken sooner. They see through illusion. They surrender the false. They walk as vessels through which God reminds the world what it forgot, that heaven is not somewhere distant. It is within the heart that has become still. So walk gently now. Move with grace. Let peace become your rhythm. Let love become your language. Let silence become your strength. For the battle is over. The ego has bowed. The Spirit reigns. And you, chosen one, you are free. You are never in control. You are being guided. You are never abandoned. You are being awakened. You are never separate. You are always one. The Spirit now leads. The heart now sees. The soul now remembers. Be still and know you are home. Amen.